Good evening, everybody, and welcome on this 1st of June for, I think this is the last online tasting before the summer that I'm organizing, and it's a good one. I'm pretty sure of that. So welcome all. Nice to see a lot of familiar faces and a couple new ones. We're going to taste. It's a little bit of a geeky night tonight. We're going to taste 8 different Kilkerrans. A vertical tasting, as you would call it, and I'm really looking forward to it. The main reason for it was that I still had these bottles and I wanted to open them. So there you go. That's always a good reason, I think. As the more vigilant of you have noticed, we had announced Fiona McFadden to be our speaker for tonight, but she wasn't feeling well today. So she called her colleague Melanie and asked her to fill in for her. So Melanie, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
How are you doing?
Yeah, fine, thanks. Yep, it's absolutely gorgeous here in Campbelltown. We're actually about 5 degrees warmer than London, so very happy with that because it doesn't happen often.
And are you tired from the festival last week?
Slowly recovering.
Yeah, I can imagine. Was it good tonight? I think it was good weather too, right? Last week, right?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was bitter wind, so really quite cold, about 12 degrees. And then Thursday, Friday, complete switch, 24 degrees. So absolutely gorgeous. Lots of people got burnt on Thursday and Friday as well. And this weather is set to continue for the next 2 weeks.
Cool. Right. Well, for the people who noticed, I'm also I got a little bit burned today. I spent the whole day on a terrace with I was working, of course. I was tasting together with a well-known local shop owner. We had good fun tonight, but it was sunny, so I'm a little bit red too. There you go. Melanie, I think the first thing we have to do before we even start talking is pour us a dram to start off, so we have something to drink. What do you think?
Yep, I think that's a good idea.
So I guess we'll start with the 12-year-old.
Yep, perfect.
And then I'm going to just let you start your story about Kilkerran whiskey.
Okie dokie, great. So
I have the perfect glass, by the way.
Oh, that's a very good one.
Yeah.
I'm impressed to see that it travelled back home very safely after that. So those of you who know, I mean, the 12-year-old was actually the first whiskey, first core product. So any sort of volume that was sold by Glengyle Distillery. And so really, really unusual because most of the newer distilleries will start selling a lot of whiskey as soon as the whiskey ages to 3 years. Because as you know, that's the key age. We can't start selling whiskey until then. But we're very lucky. We have a very wealthy individual who decided, no, we're not going to release it 3, 4, or 5. And believe it or not, was extremely patient and waited until the product was 12 years old. So as far as I'm aware, no other of the distilleries, the newer ones that have been started since the millennium, have actually waited that length of time before releasing a product of any volume.
I do remember it was a long wait before the first real official product was launched, but you had this great series, the Work in Progress series, that was really fun to follow.
Yeah, I mean, the Work in Progress was lovely because people didn't really know what they were getting. And I mean, we had all the lovely colours to let you know which year. And the only problem was when it was being designed, but we forgot to put numbers on it or ages. So it made it quite a challenge because people didn't really know what they had, especially if you went to a bar, you'd see quite a few bottles and nobody would quite know what there was. Also as well, one of the other issues was, especially in the beginning of that series, it wasn't really very clear what the maturation recipe was. Whereas towards the end, it was great because we could say if it was bourbon or sherry. And I think as well, you could definitely see how as a whiskey matured, you just got far more to talk about, far more character and far more feedback in your palate, you'd expect.
Yeah. Eric in the chat is setting the good example, guys. He's already commenting. Daft Mill waited also for 12 years to release their first release. But what I wanted to get at is, since we're only having one distillery tonight and a vertical tasting, we're kind of relying on you guys to get us a lot of feedback in the chat, tasting notes, what you think about the whiskey. So we have something to talk about. I mean, we could talk for hours about Kilkerran alone, I guess, Melanie. But the more feedback, the more interaction we have, the more fun this will be tonight. So keep on putting then your tasting notes and everything you want to ask and say in the chat. So.
Yeah. So I'd say as well, like the Work in Progress series, it was a great way for the distillers to explore, you know, what type of cask maturation worked really, really well with the style of Kilkerran. And so very much in the Work in Progress series, you could see they played with, you know, 100% sherry, 100% bourbon, mainly bourbon, you know, 50-50. And so, I mean, the recipe for the Kilkerran 12-year-old, there is a maturation recipe. So it's very much 70% bourbon and 30% sherry. And I know the next, because I'm sure somebody will ask you, is it first fill or refill? If that's ready to come through.
If nobody asks, I will ask. So there you go.
So, I mean, there's no hard or fast rule regarding that. It's more basically just what's from bourbon and what's from sherry.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure we'll all agree that the bourbon matured Kilkerran whiskies are just absolutely lovely. And so especially the Whip 5, the blue packaging, the bourbon from that, you know, people still talk about it, and it's still very much hunted down in the internet.
I think I have one bottle of that lying about in my cupboard somewhere.
Have you? Right.
Yeah. I'll check it out. And
very much so, because when we did a tasting before that, just as the 12-year-old was released, that was the top choice. That was the one that everybody wanted to revisit from that original series.
Okay, cool. So the 12-year-old, that's very much the idea, is to have the 12-year-old as your core range, your base whiskey to start from for everybody?
Yes. Yep. So we will never, I mean, for those of you who are aware with the history of Kilkerran, there was a 10-year-old available in 2014, but this was part of a 6-bottle set. And so some very lucky people, I think it's about £1,000, purchased this set. And you could get a bottle matured solely in port, Madeira, rum, Fino sherry, Oloroso sherry, and bourbon. And I think
those were the first casks laid down to rest or something like that. Was that the story behind it?
Yeah, exactly. So basically it was in the first month of production. So April 2004, these casks were filled, and they were, some of them were bottled. There was actually some spare whiskey. And so the liquid left in those casks after bottling was actually transferred into a neutral cask. And so until recently, we have actually been able to taste these whiskies that were distilled in the first month of production. But I have to say that unfortunately the stocks have really, really dwindled. I can say that, believe it or not, almost 10 years down the line, a set was just shipped out to the States last week.
Okay.
So people are not very good at keeping in contact.
No. And I do remember, as I told you just before we started, I was at the Springbank Whiskey School in 2013, and we did the last day of the Springbank Whiskey School is always the warehouse tour. And I distinctly remember we had one of those 6 casks we had a sample of and tasted it right in the warehouse. I think it was the Madeira cask.
I mean, they were very large casks.
Yeah.
And so there was a good volume from them. And so, I mean, that's why we've kept, we're able to keep them for quite a while. And also some of these casks were used for the 17-year-old bottles that were bottled, I think, probably about 2019, I think. And they came out and they were sort of casks that were split between quite a few different markets. So I'm sure Belgium would actually have got one of them, I think.
I've never seen a 17-year-old Kilkerran.
Sorry, 15.
A 15-year-old.
Year-old, yeah. So it had sort of, again, similar maturation style. Yeah.
We have a tasting note here, a really good one, of course, from Mark, who is a blogger also. And I can already announce that as soon as this tasting will be finished, the blog will be online, I guess, Mark. So thanks for that again. Tasting note, chalk and lemon on the nose, very clear and clean in my opinion, somewhat old school, quite salty and peaty on the palate and waxy. Hint of tropical fruits, long finish with some smoke and pepper, an instant classic. One of the best entry-level malts on the market. There you go, Melanie. How's that for a start?
Yep, I'm not going to disagree.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always a lovely malty, an oily whiskey. And, I like the fact that you get the sweetness from the bourbon casks. And you definitely do get like pineapple, vanilla, chocolate, stewed pears, poached pears, citrus notes as well.
Yeah.
And you just get that hint of peat, nothing too strong.
For the guys here in the tasting who are also in the classics series that we're doing, I think the next session we have in October, the Kilkerran 12 will be in the lineup. Just for you, Melanie, we're doing a series we're tasting all the classic malts from Scotland, so all the 10-year-old, 12-year-old basic malts in a series of 6 tastings.
Uh-huh.
And these guys get to enjoy them blind and have to give the feedback and the scores before they get to know what every sample is. But so Kilkerran will be there, and this will be a little bit of training for them to see if they can still recognize it in October.
Yeah, no pressure for them then.
No, of course not. It's all a bit fun. So
very, very pleasant to do. I did a blind wine tasting once, and it was absolutely hilarious because the one that my least favorite was the most expensive.
Of course, it's always like that.
I was the cheapest one was the best for me.
Yeah,
I'm delighted.
Well, I tend to agree with Mark, by the way, that it's. I mean, I just love this this stuff. The spirit is so nice, and it's so balanced. Yeah, it's just a shame that you don't make much of it.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the sort of bugbears for us all. Is production has been as little as 6 weeks a year, and then for the past sort of 4 or 5 years, it's been about 3 months a year. And so obviously there's a potential to produce all year round. But at the minute it's the same production team for Springbank as Glengyle. And so the guys work, 9 months at Springbank and then 3 months at Glengyle. So yeah, it's not as though everybody should sign up for a job at Glengyle. As soon as you hear there's only 3 months production, because there's no job in the world that would offer you a year's salary, full-time salary for just working.
Do the guys consider it a holiday when they get to work at Glengyle, or is it?
Yeah, they love it because they can actually sit down and look at a screen and press a button, and the machines will do the work for them. I mean, as I'm sure you know, at Springbank for the mash tun, the guys have to climb into the mash tun and put on their waders and get all the brushes and push all the draff and everything down. Whereas at Glengyle, it's a very modern mash tun, and so it's like a coffee filter, so it spins round and round and round and just removes all the draff automatically. And so the guys do really just have to sit on a chair, press a button on the panel, and it's all done for them.
Yeah. Sam is asking which batch year this was. I was just looking at the batch code, and apparently this is one of my older bottles because this one is a 1919. So it's an older version of the 12-year-old. Yeah. So the one that you have in your sample is from this bottle from the 2019.
Right. Yeah, so it's the very old tall clear one. So it's not our now sort of when we've switched over. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So is this still a 30% sherry, 70% bourbon? Mark is asking. The older versions.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yep. So it's always been 70% bourbon and 30% sherry. Yeah. I deliberately did that because as you know, Springbank 10 is 60 bourbon, 40 sherry. So it's got a similar cask breakdown, but not identical.
Yeah. Eric is joking that this is the best online whiskey he drank this week because he was in the session with the other classics last Tuesday, in which we had a bunch of mainly Speyside 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds that not everybody liked as much. So there you go.
All right. Okay. I'm glad you're enjoying the West Coast more than the East Coast.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
You know what? I think we should straight on go on to the 16-year-olds. If everybody's okay with that. And actually, I'm looking forward to this one because it's been a long while since I've tasted this.
Just to check, is this the 16-year-old with the blue label? The black label.
Black
Right.
label, yeah.
Perfect. And do you mind telling me was it 2020 or 21?
I'll check on the batch code.
Thank you.
This is 5th of October 2020.
Right, so that's the first one.
Yes, batch 1, I guess.
Okay.
Tom is asking a question. It definitely has the same funk as Springbank. I guess this has something to do with similarities in the process between both in production.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the production wise, I mean, obviously the barley for Glengyle is actually unfortunately Glengyle doesn't have its own malt barns, or it does have its own malt barns, but there's nothing happening there at the minute. So all the barley. Oh, sorry. I've just sorry. So the barley for Glengyle is actually malted at Springbank, and so obviously the traditional floor malting. So, I mean, I know actually that'd be a good one to do for a blind tasting as well, is to have your different floor maltings and to see if people could tell the difference in the malt from the barley malted on a traditional floor malting to a modern maltster.
Yeah.
Personally, I would really be very, very impressed if somebody could identify that. But I mean, that's definitely one of the charms about Kilkerran, is that you do have that close working relationship with Springbank. So we definitely have the sort of barley coming through. We also have the same peat level as Springbank. So both barleys are malted to 12 to 15 ppm. And so the barley is dried in the peat smoke for 6 hours and then followed by the 30 hours in the hot air. So yeah, so definitely I would say you'll get some characteristics coming through. And although it's different stills, mash tun, etc., interestingly enough, when all the casks are filled at Glengyle, that's the end of the process at Glengyle, because there are no warehouses at Glengyle. So the cask will go in the back of a lorry, round the yard, about a 200-meter journey, and then end up in the warehouses. And so in the warehouses that we have, all of the warehouses on site, we will deliberately mix up all the whiskies we produce, all the different ages, so that if there's ever a fire, we don't lose all the stock of a certain whiskey or a certain age. And I think you were saying you did whisky school in 2013.
Yeah.
Have you been back to Campbelltown since then?
I've been back in 2014, I think. Yeah, just a year after. It's
Yeah,
been a while. Yeah,
it's been a while. So, I mean, I would really recommend, if possible, coming back, because even in the past 2-3 years, it's amazing the change, especially to the site. So there's now a lovely scenic path joining both Springbank and Glengyle.
Okay.
And we also built 2 new warehouses. And so at the moment, they look like an Amazon warehouse. Although there are obviously other online retailers. But when you go in, the whiskey's been there or spirit's been maturing there for about 2 years. And so you're starting to get a bit of spirit smell. But, compared to the lovely Dunage or Racked warehouses, there's really no comparison.
Yeah.
At the minute, I mean, that's one of the biggest changes since you'll have been, is the actual number of warehousing, because that was obviously a production issue. Was when we have been increasing production, is where are we going to store it? Because obviously it's essential for us that 100% of the process, from the malting to the bottling, all happens in Campbelltown. That's something that we would never compromise on.
Is it still Norman and Kerry who take care of the warehouses?
Yeah, and you've also got Ian as well in warehousing now. Gavin's involved with that. Lee.
Okay.
So yeah, so a lot. I mean, believe it or not, there are over 100 employees now.
Wow. It's
Under.
almost doubled since then.
Oh, it's amazing. Yep, and that's for J&A Mitchell. So that's obviously Springbank, Glengyle, and Cadenheads as well. But
so have you upped production for Springbank too then?
So Springbank is now 9 months a year.
Okay.
And so that has, I think, maybe about 10 years ago, it was maybe about 150,000 litres a year, and we're now up to about 260,000 litres a year.
That's good.
Springbank. So, and I mean, obviously, Kilkerran has gone from, about 40,000 litres a year, dipped to about 20, and then back up to about 40,000 litres a year.
Well, still with 100 employees, not the most efficient setup, but but a very nice setup, I think, because the community is so important for you guys.
Oh, it really is. I mean, I moved down here from Glasgow 10 years ago, and I mean, it was a town, down in its luck. The buildings were quite dilapidated, and you could see there was the potential, but money needed to be spent, and we've been really lucky. There's been a real issue with coastal towns in the UK sort of being left behind, and people leaving school, going to university, and not returning. Which has been a real problem. And so there's been a very concentrated effort by government and a lot of spending to attract people back. And I mean, the main street in Campbelltown is, looking really, really nice. I mean, yes, you still have some empty shops, but given how the high street has been affected, I'm sure worldwide, it's not just a UK issue with the shopping habits changing. The town has really improved, and Mr. Wright has definitely helped that with his funds and trusts. Because I mean, to show you how focused he is on creating employment in Campbelltown, is that most sales and marketing teams are based in Glasgow or Edinburgh for ease of travel. But if we want to represent the company, then we have to move to Campbelltown. That's negotiable, and so that means we add on 6 hours every journey we make. So you have to be a very patient driver.
Yeah. It's a nice drive, by the way.
It's a lovely drive, as long as you don't get stuck behind a camper van at this time.
Oh yeah.
Or a timber lorry. Both can be very annoying.
Just for my information, a question to everybody in the audience here. Who of you has been to Campbelltown before, and when was that? Just put it in the chat, and I'll have an idea of that. Question from Mark, Melanie. I read that this contains 2% of Kilkerran matured on Madeira casks, the 16-year-old.
Actually, I was going to look up the product sheet. I haven't heard that one before. I'll see if I can find 16.
It's delicious, by the way. I really enjoy it. Oh.
Good. Yeah, no, the recipe I have is 75% bourbon and 25% sherry. Okay.
Mark is saying on whiskey base it says 98% bourbon and 2% Madeira. Maybe that's a later batch. I don't know.
I mean, with obviously the because we just restarted in 2004, there've been very, very few releases of the 16-year-old. And so it would only be 2020, 21, and then the most recent one in 2022, obviously the Blue 16. So yeah, from what I can see from sort of our archive, I can double check, and if you don't mind, I can email you tomorrow to confirm. But yeah, I can't find anything on the drive that would confirm that for me, that there's Madeira in it.
Sam is asking, is the blue label the old version of it, or is that the newer version? Because you said this was.
Yeah, so we did 2020 and 21 are the black, and then 2022 has the Blue 16. Okay. And I was sort of pleading with the label designer to do different colours again, because I think it's just a really nice way of sort of differentiating the bottles. It makes it far easier for somebody, for everyone. And but unfortunately I was told no. So I think it looks as though the first two will be black, and then definitely the next two, and it looks as though quite a few will have the blue.
I have the blue label.
I mean, the idea was really that, again, it's between the 12 and the 16. Most people, when they're quickly picking up a bottle, it's very easy to make a mistake.
Mhm.
When it's the same size, same style, it's just one digit that's different. So hopefully with the 16 being blue and that lovely sort of powder blue, it will just make it easier stand
out.
Yeah.
The tasting notes I have here, it has all the delicious notes of the 12-year-old, but with a layer of varnish and some minerals on top. Excellent, surprisingly sweet, and a truckload of lime, followed by a nice funkiness from the peat. That mix, lime and peat, lingers for a long time in the warming finish, and Mark is doing a happy dance again. That means that he's happy.
Yeah,
it's
good.
as easy as that. There you go.
Can I just make a wee plea to you for if you haven't tried the Kilkerran 16 in blue, I would really recommend it because that came out at the same time as the Springbank 21, and we were all doing the tasting notes in the office. And for me, and for not for everybody, but for quite a few of my colleagues, the Kilkerran 16 was actually the standout whiskey in that group. And definitely given the price point, it was very, very good value for money. And I'm sure some of you will have been to, if not heard of, the Whiskey Fringe in Edinburgh every August. And it has a show which you can vote for any whiskey you like as the favourite whiskey of the show. And it takes place over 3 days. And I'm delighted to say that the Kilkerran 16 was actually in the top 5, which is really, really unusual for a sort of limited whiskey.
Yeah.
From Campbelltown and from Kilkerran. So we were delighted with that result.
It is very good indeed. So nice. I have the feeling that we're warmed up now for the main course for the tasting. So the cask strength ones. It was quite hard to put them in the right order because they're all 8-year-old, because they're all cask strength. The ABV is all between 55.7 and 57.5, so very close to each other. There is some difference between the maturations of these. So I think I talked to Fiona for the lineup, and we're going to start with the 3 bourbon matured ones. I think that's the most sensible thing to do. And those 3 I've just put in the order of ABV. So we'll start with the 55.7% one, which is actually the bottling from 2017, also the oldest one that we have.
Perfect. Yep, no, it was a great way to go, definitely. I think just it's always nice to start with the bourbon ones, as definitely the sherry ones anyway, they can tend to sort of dry out my palate very much indeed.
I would suggest, if possible, for everybody here to put the 3 bourbon matured ones, so the 55.7, the 55.8, and the 56.5 next to each other, maybe, to compare them. What do you think, Melanie?
No, I think that's a great idea. And then even sort of taking a sip from each of them and then going back. Because definitely even when you're doing a tasting, it's always really nice to leave some in your first or second glass and to go back, because definitely the first one can get a bit of a raw deal sometimes when it's just waking up your taste buds.
I've just put Post-its with the numbers on my bottles so I don't make mistakes when I take the bottles out, because they're also so similar. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, you'll be delighted now that we've changed the sort of short tubby bottles.
Yeah.
Far more solid than these ones.
Yeah.
So I mean, as I was sort of saying earlier, I mean, the bourbon matured Kilkerrans are, for me, really, really great examples of what the distillery has to offer, because the bourbon casks don't really hide anything. They really, really like the style that you're aiming for in the distillery to come through. And I mean, I think the bourbon ones were obviously all the cask strength we're tasting tonight. That all the colour is natural. We don't add any caramel to our whiskey, and then also we don't chill filter. And so very much, how the whiskey is matured, how greedy the angels have been with the cask strength is exactly what has gone into the bottle. And also as well, the water that we use at the whole stage of process. So even when the spirit is going into the cask, we add water always from Campbelltown Loch. Now, I would be very, very impressed if anybody there had any local Campbelltown water to add, if they wanted to dilute down their whiskey. Or is they going to admit
I
to
don't
that?
have it. I don't have it here, but
No.
there's a bunch of geeks here, so probably somebody has some Campbelltown water.
Right, okay. I would be very worried if it came from Crosshill Loch. I wouldn't actually recommend it because that's the loch where everybody goes swimming in summer. And also as well, the filtration system will include, without doubt, some supermarket trolleys. Ended up there.
Yeah. Just Marcus is noticing that the one we're having is indeed batch 2. There is a batch 1 also from 2017, but I didn't have that bottle. So this is batch 2 from 2017.
Right. So I mean, it's obviously quite a new series, just starting in 2017. So if we'd produced a lot of whiskey in 2004, it would be a 13-year-old, but you can see where it obviously took time. And then, we waited 12 years before releasing a core product. But during that time, we were obviously busy tasting everything as it was maturing. And we decided the 8 years we had really nice sort of distinct characteristics that would come through in the cask strength series. And I think it's just really, really nice because so many people want to taste the whiskey in its sort of raw state, so to speak. And yes, you can definitely add water if you wish. But as we all know, the issue is once you've added it, you can't take it away.
Take it out anymore. Yeah.
And I mean, I always like to say that, we're actually we're becoming James Bond when you're adding water to your whiskey, because you're definitely giving yourself a license to kill.
No way back.
Yes, no way back at all.
No way back, yeah. So is the setup like it is now with you have the 12-year-old, which is your core range base whiskey. You have the 8-year-old as a cask strength, and you have the 16-year-old. Is that the setup for the range to be like in the next couple of years too, or are there any other plans to add other ages or?
Yeah, I think we're definitely looking at having an older whiskey than the 16. But it just sort of very much, depends on how much volume we have. Because as I was saying earlier, we did fill these casks, in March, April 2004, but a lot of that whiskey went into the 10-year-old set and then into the 15-year-olds that were sold as a special edition. And so it is unfortunately just, it's a waiting game. It's very much the patience for maturation. And then also just, for us, we're wanting to make sure we've got a product of quality and that, is, people will enjoy, and I mean, we'll enjoy drinking it itself. So yeah, I mean, I would be very surprised if there wasn't an older version of Kilkerran coming out in the next few years. That's very much sort of up to production to sort of, tip us a wink and say, yep, we've been doing enough tasting and we think, yep, this has developed enough and we've got confidence in it.
Yeah. Also for the 8-year-old, it's a cask strength. It's not a single cask. It's a small batch bottling, I guess. Or do you have any idea on how limited or how many production there is for the 8-year-old?
I mean, you can see how limited it is. The fact that it was 3 months of production a year. So you're talking about 100,000 litres a year, at the time. So given the angel share, not much at all. Excuse me.
But you don't have any idea on is it 3 casks, 4 casks that make up these 8-year-olds batches or?
Sorry, no.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So everybody's tasting the 3 bourbon ones, and what is immediately apparent is that they're very different from each other. I feel, which is surprising because they're all 8-year-olds, all cask strength versions. But Tom is remarking that the middle one, so the second one, is extremely floral in his opinion. I don't know if anybody else, Eric says it's more grassy. So just for your reference, the second one that we're having, the 55.8% one, is the 2022 bottling. So it's 5 years more recent than the first one. Well, the bottling is more recent, and then the last one, the bourbon one, is the 56.5%, which is the batch from 2018. So there's a bit of difference in, well, a couple of years more in the bottle, I guess. But
You know, sorry, the middle one, the one that's 55.8,
Mhm.
that was actually February 2023, that one.
Then I'm going to check, because I think that's also wrong on Whiskey Base then. Yeah, 55.8. It says 2022 on Whiskey Base, so it's 2023. There you go.
No, I'm pretty sure it's.
No, it says the bottle code says 28/11/2022.
Let's see.
Last year November.
Right. I think I might actually have the. Sorry, I'll just have a wee look at the sheet. Right. Right. Oh, sorry, I thought I'd taken it down. I'll just have a quick look here. So, bourbon. So yeah, so last year we had a port and a sherry that came out in February 2022, and then the bourbon and sherry. Yeah, so sorry, what was the code you had for that one?
It says 28th of November 2022.
Yep, so although it was bottled then, it wasn't released till February.
Until February.
So that's
Yep.
why, that's where I'm getting the February from.
Yeah, I imagine, because I bought this together with the other one, the sherry one we're having later on, and they were both released together in the shops here. So.
Yeah. So yeah, yeah. You're working at lots of different time zones here.
Yeah, there you go.
Uh-huh.
For batch 2, we already have some tasting notes from Mark. Very clean, with hints of don't laugh coconut, some caramel and spices, a little umami even. The taste gives me something of salted almonds with a lot of peat. The smoke makes my mouth all hot. Blissfully long finish. So that's for the 55.7 one. I guess this was the first one. Well, no, it's batch 2. So the part of the first year that you started doing the 8-year-old cask strength.
Yeah, yep. So I think this would have been, I think I'm right in saying the very first one was sherry matured. So again, you can see they were also sort of, trying to see how, your 100% bourbon or your 100% sherry, matured, whereas for the 12 and the 16 was when we sort of combined different maturations. And if you want, I mean, I do have like the original product sheets, so I could sort of pick out a few of the tasting notes that were on the tasting sheets at the time, if you're interested in that.
Yeah, could be. It's always interesting, because it's I hear the batch 1 is also bourbon. It says, well,
right.
Whiskey Base says that, but
yeah. Can you tell me what the ABV was of the very first one?
Well, the one we're having in the sample now is 55.7.
All right, so I've got 56.2%, which I have April 2017.
Yeah, that's the batch 1.
That's the very first one.
Yeah.
So yes, that's also 100% bourbon. So that'll be the first 2 were bourbon, and then the next one.
Well, the 2018 one is also bourbon, I think, because that's the 56.5 one that we have. That's number 3.
Yeah,
here,
so 56.5. Yeah, bourbon is bourbon, and then the one November 2019 was the sherry one.
Yeah, Richard Oloroso. That's the one we're having all the way at the end.
Yep, and then the 21 and 23.
Both sherry.
Yeah, the sherry. Yeah. So I mean, for the second release, which is the one we're having as the first in the 8-year-old bourbon cask strength, for the nose, it's sort of waxy with vanilla pods, lemon sponge, candy floss, malted barley, and digestive biscuits. And then on the palate, we've got watermelon, lime and lemon zest, green apples, pencil shavings, salted peanuts, golden syrup with light mineral notes. And then for the finish, we have the peat smoke, but an earthiness, briny, and some licorice as well.
So that was the official tasting notes when this was released?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
Always fun to hear tasting notes, I feel, because it gives you a guideline, but it's never really the same with what you experience yourself. So
yeah, very much so. And we have a Peruvian working at the distillery now, and we were doing tasting notes, and obviously we were, saying like apples, oranges, or whatever. And then, we really sort of reminded us that, people all around the world have, different fruits, different vegetables. And so it is really, I'd say, more sort of like European and American, more your continents having a difference. And I mean, I think in Scotland and the UK, we definitely have a sweet tooth. And I know you've always got that debate about chocolate, which I think we've got far more sugar than you would have for a traditional Belgian chocolate. And so there's a lot of discussion as to that.
Yeah. I read somewhere that I think it's the American type of Americans have another type of chocolate too, and they used to have it in the Second World War, and they actually added some flavor that reminded them of baby puke, just to keep the soldiers from eating too much of that, because they needed it to save it for when they really needed it. But since they started using that kind of flavor for chocolate, became the go-to flavor for the Americans now. So if you get American chocolate, it always has a little bit of baby puke flavor in it.
See, I'd love to know who's actually tasted baby puke. With all these
I don't know, but I remember last Tuesday we had a couple of tasting notes for a couple of whiskeys that said baby puke. So there you go.
Is that the Hershey brand?
I think right. Like the real American type of chocolate brand is always and I guess it's a little bit more sour to our palates, something like that. But it was a deliberate scheme for the American army to keep the soldiers from eating all the chocolate all at once. So.
Okay. So they're actually looking after their health. They were probably encouraging them to smoke cigarettes.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, drink Coca-Cola. Drink Coca-Cola. Yeah. There is a debate going on about the tasting notes, but hey, Mark, just let yourself go, man. Just keep on giving the tasting notes, and everybody else add your tasting notes too. Don't feel shy.
Do you want me to go through the tasting notes for the current 8-year-old cask?
Yeah, maybe. So the batch 8 one that we have now, Mark has already put them down. Maybe you can go first, and then we can compare.
Right. Yep. Okay, so this time we're getting more floral notes coming through, such as elderflower and heather. I don't know if you've got much heather in Belgium, but I'm sure you can imagine. And then we also get some vanilla, custard creams, and then the foam bananas that are really popular in Scotland. Again, very sort of artificial, but actually you can identify them as some form of banana. But we also dip them into chocolate as well. So so quite sweet. On the palate, we get cocoa nibs and Iberico ham. And then we get some sort of earthy peat coming through. And then we get again sort of a tropical side of your pineapple and coconut. Then in the finish, you get your peat coming to the fore, and then also digestive biscuits, which again is would you have digestive biscuits in Belgium?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Perfect.
So Mark's tasting notes, completely different nose. digestive biscuits, soot and lime. So there you go. A bonfire on the beach, very oily on the tongue. Again, quite a bit of salt, even a hint of kelp. Stewed apples, unripe banana, and the classic citrus. The medium finish offers lime, sweet malt, and delicious smoke. So lots of stuff coming back there.
Yeah, no, it's good. There are similarities.
Yeah, the fun thing to do in a tasting like this is to go look for what I would like to call the character of the distillery, of the spirit of the distillery, which should shine through in all these bottlings, I guess. So, what would you say is the main? What is Kilkerran? What is the Kilkerran character?
To me, you definitely get a nice oiliness coming through. I mean, when I'm drinking a whiskey, I love to pour it in the glass and then just move the glass round so that the whiskey coats the glass. And then you can see, you know, how oily it is if you've got narrow legs or if you've got the wider church windows. You know, it's all sort of like building up the anticipation of actually tasting. And then I love to have just waft it underneath my nose and see if I can identify any lovely delicate aromas that are being pushed up into the nose, you know, by the style of the glass. And also as well, I like just adding a few drops of water to maybe just open it up slightly, especially if it's cask strength. I mean, sometimes I'm just amazed how smooth a whiskey is cask strength. But other times I think just adding a few notes of water, it can just sort of shake it up a bit and sort of make the aromas that you can identify by your nose that bit more intense and just again open it up slightly. I would say as well, the barley, you definitely get cereal notes quite often coming through in the whiskey. And you get your slight hint of peat. But I mean, for me, you know, so many people when they hear peat, especially when they're just dipping into whiskey, you know, they think it's going to be very medicinal or antiseptic. And I mean, I think this is very much an introductory peat level. It's very good for somebody dipping their toes in who wants to try something different but isn't quite sure, just to see if it does suit their palate or if it's something they'd like to explore more, or if they feel no, that's enough peat, and I don't want too much of that dimension in my glass.
I feel like that's certainly true for like the 12-year-old, which is bottled at 46%, or like also the 16-year-old. For the cask strength ones, the peat is much more to the forefront for me. The smokiness, the peat is much more clear in that one. For the 12-year-old, it's much more smooth and like you said, to get people into peatiness, the 12-year-old is really, really well suited. So.
Yep. I mean, I know we're actually not tasting these tonight, but the heavily peated series.
Yep.
You know, we're obviously talking again about a younger whiskey, so we're talking about a 5-year-old. And I mean, that's actually, I mean, to my surprise, that is actually one of my favourite Kilkerran whiskies out there, is the heavily peated, because it's like a sweet smoky creme brulee to me. So again, you can just, you know, although the whiskey is all made the same way, you know, it's in similar maturation, you know, got so many different aspects that can alter, that can give character to the whiskey. And I mean, again, it's just like when you're nosing a whiskey, it's just giving you a hint, but you actually don't know if that's what you're going to get to taste.
So the heavily peated one is actually different malt, right? Differently peated malt, or?
Yes, so the heavily peated, you're talking about 80 ppm. And unfortunately, we tried to do that level at Springbank, but without much success. And so it's the only one that we outsource. And so it's heavily peated is the only whiskey we make where the barley is delivered already malted. So it's malted elsewhere.
Yep.
And that's because we wanted to get a really, really high peat level. And we did our best, but we just didn't have any success.
There are tasting notes for number 3 already, but I'll give the other guys a chance to add something if they want. I was just looking at Whiskey Base again and saw the prices they are asking for these older bottlings of the 8-year-old, and they are quite high sometimes. You see them for as high as 180, 200 euros a bottle nowadays. And even Sorry,
is that the mainly sherried ones that are that price, or is that one?
I think so. Yeah, I think I saw some. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also the last bottling that we had a couple months ago, the most recent bottling, it was kind of hard to get it in the shops because it was flying out of the shops and people were putting it on auction sites straight afterwards because it was again a sherry one. How do you guys feel about this practice?
Oof.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's funny. I mean, Kilkerran has always been the poorer cousin to Springbank. And I mean, there has been a real issue, since COVID of the prices of Springbank.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's just really gone to show me that, everything has pros and cons. Again, especially if you're in a sales job, you think it must be wonderful to sell out of everything. But all I can say is it is wonderful, yes, but it's also very frustrating
Mm-hmm.
because it causes its own problem. And I mean, again, if you come to Campbelltown, you'll see that the shop has had to change. And so now we have quite often a certain number of bottles of the product on the shelf on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And also, although it's wonderful, people have travelled to Campbelltown. The allocation again is one bottle per person. And I mean, sometimes you feel as though you're having to put on a police hat, man or woman.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, the thing is, really, you want people to buy your whiskey and drink it.
Yeah,
You're not wanting people to, buy it and sell it
I flip it. Yeah.
for a grossly inflated price.
Mm.
But unfortunately, given just the economics, if somebody puts up a product at a funny price and unfortunately somebody's going to pay it, then and that makes you not just a €10 profit, but maybe €100 profit.
Mm.
Yeah, that's that's the issue at the minute. But I mean, I think we're definitely, we've been working with our importers and the retailers in the UK to try and ensure that, fair pricing is very much, for people who buy directly from us, it's very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in one way,
That's
the likes of Whiskey Base and that, it's great because, people will send us photos to say, look, we've seen this product on it, that. And then if that person buys directly from us, then great, we can act on it.
Yeah.
But as you know, the issue is if it's second or third party, then
you have
that's
no control, of
under their
course.
control.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
That's
please
also
keep the pictures coming. It's wonderful for the communication for that to work.
it's also part of the reason I just wanted to open these bottles tonight. So
Yeah.
all of these.
Yeah. No, thank you very much.
Tasting notes for number 3, the 56.51, so the 2018 bottling. The sweet little brother of the 3, white chocolate, vanilla, and cashew nuts, banana chips. On the taste side, were treated to a true battle between sweet, salty, and bitter notes. Very spicy, nicely balanced, long, slightly astringent finish. What a fantastic complexity for such a young animal. And then we have Tom saying custard, bananas, leather, liquid dessert. So yeah.
Yep, no, I'd say very much agree with that. I've got for the nose, worn leather, pipe tobacco, sponge cake, vanilla pods, clotted cream, key lime pie, and green apple skins.
Mhm.
And then for the palate, golden syrup cake, banoffee pie, and toasted marshmallows. And then in the finish, you've got your peat, your earthy note from the Dunnage warehouse, and then also some grassy, herbal grassiness coming through too. So yep, so again, definitely the same sort of description, but maybe in different sections. So your palate, rather than your nose, etc.
Well, the main thing that not surprises me, that pleases me a lot, is that we have 3 different 8-year-old cask strengths, all 3 on bourbon casks, and all 3 very different, in my opinion. So that's really cool to do this side by side. I don't know if everybody agrees, but for me, these are quite different whiskies to taste next to each other. So with the same character running through it, of course, but yeah, nice.
I know this is a nice surprise, for anybody, coming into whiskey, they'd see, you know, a whiskey the same age, the same maturation, you know, how can it be different? But I mean, to me, that's the magic of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel so too.
Mm.
Mark is saying already this is quickly turning into the best tasting of the year, even though we're only halfway both the tasting and the year. So, well, let's hope the next 3 ones are living up to that,
Yeah,
Mark.
let's hope so. Let's hope there's some of you who like the sherry matured whiskies.
Well, maybe we should do just the same thing, put all 3 of them next to each other and taste them as we go and taste them next to each other because for number, well, the next one in line is going to be the 57.5%, which is the 2023 bottling, the most recent one. Number 7 in line is the 56.9%, which is a 2021 one. And the last one in line is the 57.1%, which is the 2019 one. Did everybody get that all right? So first 57.5, next 56.9, and third 57.1. I'll put it in the chat too if you want. So nobody can make any mistakes on what we're talking about. Because there are some slight differences in type of sherry casks used for these ones too. So, number 1, 57.5%.
Yeah, so we can see here as well, we've got the different shape and bottle.
Yep.
With the very first one, we've got a nice short stubby bottle. And then, which I think is always just a bit more substantial, I think, less difficult to break.
It feels more quality.
All right, okay.
You know how the eye and how the taste and how everything influences your taste. So
Yeah. And then the other two, the second and the third one in the sherry section is back to the tall clear.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
also the idea is from now on to keep on the stubby bottles, the smaller ones.
Yeah, very much so. So I think it was just you know, you can imagine yourself if we used to have a very traditional bottling line where 4 bottles were put in by hand and then they were filled and then all taken down by hand and the corks put in by hand.
That's the Springbank bottling line, right?
So this is in the bottling hall, yes, at Springbank.
Yeah.
So where all the Springbank, Hazelburn, Longrow, Kilkerran and also Cadenhead whiskies are bottled.
Yep.
And then about 2015, they invested in a brand new bottling line because at that time, that's where the bottleneck in production was bottling. We were actually only bottling about 400 cases a day. Which just, even for us at that time, it was really, really struggling to keep up with volume and interest. And so they invested in a brand new Italian design, so our Ferrari line, where basically the guys just put the bottles in at the start. You had machines then that filled them, put the corks, the caps on, the labels on. And then it was only at the very end of the process that the bottles were put into the cartons and then they were all sealed up. And so it definitely made it more efficient. But then the issue came when we had to change all the different parts because we had a different style of bottle. And so it's wonderful to have the same style of bottle now, and then you can just run everything through. And so it's far more efficient. And I think as well, just everybody preferred the shorter bottle because, as you say, it just feels more quality as well, definitely.
Yeah. Just a little anecdote. I already said that I was at the whiskey school in 2013, so we did the hand bottling then. And we actually were, when we were working at the bottling line that day, we did Cadenheads, and we actually, there was one bottling which was a 25-year-old Highland Park on a very sherry heavy cask. And I can tell everybody that I personally put every single one of the cork stops into the bottles by hand. So for the whole wide world, every single one bottle was corked by me.
And can you remember the number of bottles it was?
Oh, a couple hundred.
There you go. Was it the longest few hours of your life?
No, that was actually a lot of fun because sometimes we had to check quality, and if not everything was right, we could take a little sip and then pour it back into the bottling line. So
All right.
Yeah.
So
We also did a, we also did
alcoholic.
a, yeah, we also did a 35-year-old Caperdonic that day. So yeah,
Oh,
lots of fun. Yeah.
I imagine you were finding quite a few impurities then in the.
Oh, yeah, there was lots of trouble that day.
Yeah. Yes. And why not take advantage of it?
Yeah, well, there you go.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Kevin is asking which batches these are. Well, the whiskey base codes are on your labels, so you can check it at whiskey base which batches they are. But um, they
So
are in order, so there you go. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean so the very first one is obviously the most recent one. And I mean for the sherry matured whiskies, I mean as you all know, it's been a real struggle to find sherry casks within the whiskey world because just it's so popular because so many people choose their whiskey, buy their whiskey by the color of it. Even when you've been in it for a while, you're just naturally drawn to a deeper, darker product because you're just associated, with quality and whether it sort of your palate or not. So I mean, I was lucky enough to visit Jerez a few years ago, and it was just lovely. Sort of seeing where all the sort of the very first stage of the sherry casks took place, and I mean, when I came back from that. I just wanted to encourage people to buy sherry, because for my generation, it was very much my grandmother who would drink sherry, and she would have a wee glass of sherry to sort of prepare herself for Sunday lunch with her grandchildren. And unfortunately, that generation is no longer with us, and sherry sales were, dropping off. And I'm glad to say that there's obviously been a resurgence in sherry. And there is a definite sort of younger crowd coming through who really appreciate it. And so all I can do is recommend is that you are struggling to buy a birthday or Christmas present for anybody, as long as they're over 18, please do buy them
Sherry.
a sherry bottle, please.
Yeah. Well, either sherry or any of your own products, of course.
Yes, well, that goes without saying.
Of course. Well, we're getting a couple of tasting notes, but also an aha erlebnis and a question for Mark. Melanie, could it be that you once hosted him and his family at a tasting at Glengoyne Distillery in 2011?
Oh golly, possibly. Yes, that's where I worked until 2012.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so somebody's got a very good memory. Yeah.
And then we're getting some tasting notes already, especially about the second one. The nose of the second one, so the 56.9% one, is wow. It's Werther's Originals squared. They're saying so. A little bit of caramel too. There you go. Yeah. There are some differences in the type of sherry cask used. So what I found on Whiskey Base, again, I don't know if it's correct, but the first one just says sherry cask. This 56.9% one says first fill Oloroso. And then the last one, the 57.1%, says recharred Oloroso. So that also makes a difference, I guess.
So I would say I've got the original product sheets for the first two that we're tasting in the sherry, and they both just say 100% sherry for me.
So nothing about first fill or no?
No. And I mean for the final one and the three for the sherry, I agree it's saying recharred Oloroso sherry casks. I would say sherry wise, I mean most of our sherry is Oloroso casks if we have it in stock.
Do you have a certain bodega that you always work with, or is it just when you get on good casks, it doesn't matter from which bodega they come?
Yeah, no, in the past, I'd say probably about the past 6-8 years, we've been getting them from Miguel Martin. And so there's definitely been a concentrated effort to improve the supply. Because before then it was just very much, ad hoc. We would maybe get in touch with a broker and then they would say, yes, we have these casks available. Personally, I feel it's such a shame that you know, 15, 20 years ago, it would have been easy to build a relationship with a sherry bodega, and especially when we've got such limited production. But you know, just as the whiskey boom has continued and the popularity has grown, and it's just been more and more difficult, more and more of a challenge to get these casks. And I mean, I think we can all see in the future as, you know, more and more distilleries come online, it's just going to become more of an issue. And so, I mean, that's why it's quite good that people have now decided that they can, you know, toast again and scrape the cask together and that extra life. Because I mean, obviously, until a few years ago, you would say, you know, 3 fills and then there'd be nothing left for a cask to give. But that's where it's really good that, I mean, technology can improve and still just give us that nice richness once it's had the very basic toasting and charring again.
I was just thinking of something. It's completely different, but we of course all know the local barley additions from Springbank. Does Kilkerran work with local barley?
No. Local
And
barley is definitely a Springbank baby.
It's a Springbank thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So no infection there towards Kilkerran to try that with Kilkerran too, because
I think we're very aware that we don't just want to do, you know, what's at Springbank at Kilkerran. You know, for Kilkerran at Glengyle, we've really wanted to do something a bit more sort of hip, a bit more trendy. You know, just a bit, so there are no rules really to it. Whereas, you know, Springbank is, you know, it's got such a following, such a passion, and you know, people love the tradition, and so there's very much an expectation. Whereas for Kilkennan, because it's new, it can develop. You know, you've still got a lot more options.
What I also like about Kilkerran is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of well, it seems to be very traditional in the way that it's bourbon casks and sherry casks, and not many other like crazy wine casks or stuff like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose for the
first
different casks we've tried are like Port Madeira rum. And I don't know if anybody was over for the recent festival, but we had the Kilkerran Open Day bottling this year. It was a 17-year-old triple distilled, 100% bourbon. And so that has been released several times now. I think that's maybe the 3rd release we've had. And I mean, it's an absolutely, for me personally, it was my outstanding whiskey of the Campbelltown Malts Festival. It's just in the nose, full of pineapple, toasted marshmallow, and then the triple distillation definitely makes it very, very smooth. So I would definitely recommend if any of you were coming over to Campbelltown.
Melanie, have you got any bottles left?
We have got some left.
Okay, but we have to go there, I guess.
Unfortunately, yes.
Damn.
But it's a very easy trip. You just fly into Glasgow and then you can fly down to Campbelltown.
I know, but well, yeah. If anybody goes, bring me a bottle, please. Okay, we've got for the first sherry matured one, so the 57.51 batch 9. Sweet dough on black currants, Earl Grey tea, nougat, sultanas, but also cinnamon and a slight hint of sulfur, which fortunately dissipates quickly. A bit sharp on the tongue, right? Mocha, sultanas, soot, and candy sugar. The aftertaste shows a little too much tannin for my liking, but also beef jerky and cloves. And Tom is asking, why was it triple distilled, Kilkerran?
So Kilkerran basically was very much the baby of Frank McCarty, who was manager at Springbank, and so then came over to evolve with Glengyle. And before he retired to Campbelltown at the age of 50, he was actually a head distiller at Bushmills in Northern Ireland. And so he's actually the one who's responsible for creating Hazelburn triple distilled. And so he had a chat with Mr. Wright when they started Glengyle to say, look, you know, we've got this triple distillation at Springbank with Hazelburn. I know we only have 2 stills at Glengyle, but he knew some way, and I've asked the production guys to explain it to me, but I'm afraid I just don't get it. So I would say next time you come to Campbelltown, ask a production guy how they managed to do a triple distillation with 2 stills.
Yeah.
But they manage it somehow, and it does. It gives a really, really smooth whiskey.
And are you still triple distilling at Glengyle right now, or was it a Frank McCarty thing?
No, they did do triple distillation a few years ago. I can't remember exactly when, because I remember the production guys were sort of talking it through with Frank to make trying to find out how he had done it. Not many of them had been there, and so no, they did do it. But yeah, I'm not sure which year. But I remember again when we were sort of tasting samples, around about 2014, 2015. The triple distillation was one of the samples that really, really stood out for us anyway.
Oh wow, that second one. Sorry, was that out loud? I think so, yeah.
Do you want me to go through the tasting notes that I have?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Marcus put some down too, but you go ahead. Yeah.
Yep. So for the first one, the 57.5, we're looking at obviously sweet and smoke on the nose, your toasted marshmallows, your smoked ham, some dark chocolate and some cloves. And then in the palate, you've got a sort of maritime notes coming through, sea salt, fishing nets, but also some of your toffee apples as well. And then in the finish, the sweet peat, and then also some burnt candy. So your crunchy, your toffee honeycomb. And then for the second one, the 56.9, we've got actually quite sort of juicy, like your cherries, vanilla fudge, toffee pudding. And then the palate, you've got again quite a lot of fruits, your plums and sweet raspberry, and then also some coastal characteristics, but this time with the sea salt and the cacao and barbecue meat coming in the finish.
Yeah, well, tasting notes from Mark. Intense nose on dark, sweet, fruity notes. Ribs on the barbecue, curry ketchup, waxed leather. Mighty on the tongue, coffee, milk, chocolate, figs, and roast beef. Umami, which is followed by red fruit and honey. Plum liqueur. And even the aftertaste is intense with a deathbed bitter touch. Excellent.
See, when people are saying like it's sort of tingly on the tongue, would you want to add water to that? Or would you say, you quite like that sensation?
I actually love this.
Right.
Like it is, doesn't need anything else, but yeah.
Yeah.
Question from Fred and Koen is, was the 16-year-old rum open day 2022 also triple distilled?
No. No, if it was triple distilled, it would definitely say.
Just gonna get a bottle here.
Oh, sorry. It would definitely say on the label, without doubt.
I actually have a cask sample here from it.
Oh wow!
If you can see it, it's a 2004 Kilkerran on rum.
Right.
That a very gentle little bird brought me one day. It's almost finished, so
it's something, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice. It was never bottled. I think it was never officially bottled, but yeah.
And did you get the nice rum notes coming through in
Oh
that?
yeah. It's yeah. You know what? For everybody that's coming to the Rooftop Spirits Festival, the 25th of June, which I organize here a little bit further on, I'll bring this final bit of sample for. If you come and ask me, we'll get a sample. There you go.
And you'll have to get there quick because there's not much left.
There's not much left, no. So probably the first 3 or 4 will get a taste of it.
Yeah. There you go. They can put on their running shoes.
Yeah, there you go. Mark is already putting first dibs.
Right.
And he's ahead of everybody because he's also there before the audience comes in. So I guess you're getting a taste of it, Mark.
I think you've got lots of volunteers, I'm sure, to help you set up.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. I'm pretty sure. Eric will be there early too, so yeah, it'll be finished quickly.
Yeah.
I really enjoy this 56.9 one, the second one. It's a little bit more dirty than the other one too, I feel. And then maybe on to the last one, which is then the Recharred Oloroso. I actually thought Recharred would mean that it would be more intense because it would have revived the cask a little bit, but I do feel it's a little bit more subdued than the other two. I don't know if everybody else gets it, but So for the 8-year-olds, Melanie, it's always 2 releases each year?
Not always, no. I would most years 2, but some years just 1 as well. And
2020 there was none because of COVID, of course.
Yes. But I would say that for the cask strength, it's mainly obviously sherry, bourbon are the 2 main ones, but we've obviously had the port as well, which was quite an interesting one to come through. And then next year we're just finalizing next year's, but I think next year's is just going to be 1 release. And I'm not quite sure if it's going to be sherry or bourbon. But I mean, as you know, it's sort of fluctuating all the time with us. You'll definitely get whiskey, but we're not quite sure what yet.
Who selects the 8-year-olds, the casks for the 8-year-olds? Is that a joint effort or?
Yeah, so it's basically like the production team will go and take samples, and then sort of Finlay, Ranald and David will sort of sit down and, taste them and then think, yep, that's a goer, or no, we want to, tweak that, add something else maybe. And so then they'll, sort of blend and do their own sample with the different casks and see if it's going to work or not before going on to the bigger stage and actually vatting the casks together. But I mean, the distillery of Glengyle obviously has sort of had a bit of a bumpy, road, even although it's been, privately financed by an individual. That has its own, pros and cons as anything. So I mean, we've had, variable production levels. But I mean, the good news for Glengyle is that within the next 5 to 10 years, the malting will actually move back to Glengyle.
Okay.
And so at the moment, the thinking is they're looking for a Saladin box to the malting. As again, that would give visitors the chance to, see the more traditional malting at Springbank.
And see it compared to what's happening at Springbank, of course.
And see the more modern option at Glengyle. Because, I mean, as those of you who know and love and are frustrated by the lack of supply, I mean, it's crazy that, for 3 months of the year, barley being malted at Springbank is not being used to distill Springbank. And so that's definitely, everybody's keen to move on to a 12-month production at Springbank. And then, and one way of solving that, overnight is by getting the malt barns up and running. Because we have a space for them at Glengyle, but it's just being used for storage at the moment. So everybody's very keen to try and get that, brought.
Yeah, you could basically up the production by a quarter if you add 3 more months of production.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. No problem. Yep. And then as we were talking about the price issues, earlier on, I mean, that would definitely, when you get more volume, just naturally, it's got to affect the price as well. And it means that people can enjoy it again. And it's a whiskey, and it's, go back to when they could actually find it on the shelf rather than having to
hunt it down.
Yeah. I mean, because I can't believe that. I mean, a few years ago, I would recommend people would buy 3 bottles, one to enjoy, one to, put into the cupboard, and then one, to sell and get your money back. And I mean, nobody could envisage the quick turnaround. And I mean, I think maybe it was already coming, but then maybe with COVID, it just sort of speeded and intensified whole sort of market experience.
Are you still doing also the Christmas bottlings at Springbank for the employees and the colleagues?
Yep. So we were actually very fortunate this year, with the sort of cost of living crisis. They bottled. We got a very old Springbank, sort of a prelude to the start of the Countdown collection, which was available in by ballot at the end of March and beginning of April. And so yeah, so very generous indeed. So a very nice Christmas present for everybody.
It's very quiet in the chat, Melanie. I think everybody kind of just is enjoying the whiskies, but
Yep.
yeah. Now, as I said, Marcus has put down his tasting notes. Maybe everybody, if there's still questions, now will be the time to put them in the chat, because we're getting to. You've noticed this is the last whiskey in the tasting, so we're getting to the end of the tasting. But put your questions down, please. Tasting notes for the 57.1% one. Clear notes of red fruit, milk chocolate, sweet malt, and some menthol. Surprising but great. Toffee and peat go hand in hand here. Who would have ever thought this could be so beautiful? On the taste, I again get barbecue touches, marinated ribs with a honey sauce. Quite a pile of peat, actually. In the very long finish, I get cherry juice, after eight, and a nice salty touch. Fantastic. 8 years old, can't you believe that? Note to self, hunt down another bottle of this. There you go. And Eric is saying the 57.1 he had already tasted and he thought it was super and intense, but the 56.9 one is even better, wilder, and more intense. Met een serieuze hoek af. I don't know how to translate that. It misses a corner. It's like kind of outside the box. It's a bit different. Een hoek af, that's what we say in Belgium.
So, but positive?
It's positive, yeah. It's very positive. Yeah. The last two, batch 5, batch 4, are real treasures, especially at this age. Superb. It misses a corner. Yeah, Marcus making fun of me now. A question before Mark starts even laughing more at me. Will there be a standard range bottling coming out of the Peat in Progress project?
As in, you mean like a 6-year-old, 7, 8-year-old, something like that?
Like a heavily, instead of the heavily peated, like something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're not. I mean, some people have noticed how it used to say peat in progress, but it now says heavily peated on the label. And so, as far as I'm aware, it's basically going to be a no age statement, heavily peated version of Kilkerran. But I would say, I mean, it's to keep that heavily peated in it is obviously going to be a young whiskey. So, I mean, I'd be surprised if it ever went over sort of 5 or 6 years old. But yep, as far as I'm aware, there's not going to be any number on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got that coming out twice every year, and that's fairly, because that's one of the newer ones, you know, it was all sort of all planned. I mean, I'm not saying there wasn't any planning before, but it was far more sort of, let's see what we're doing today rather than looking at the long term. And so with the heavily peated, because we had that long-term planning, it's definitely going to be available for like 2 bottlings a year for the future.
Why are you doing an 8-year-old cask strength instead of a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old cask strength? Tom is asking.
Right, so 12-year-old cask strength, definitely too much like Springbank. So I would say anything that you like at Springbank, we're not going to do that. 16-year-old, I mean, we don't have the stock. I mean, we're struggling to, you know, have a decent amount of stock for the 16-year-old at 46%. And so a cask strength would definitely be, you know, a struggle. I mean, hopefully in the future, you know, if we ever got to, you know, 12-month production or not even 12 months, actually, even if we got to 6 months, there'd obviously be more stock available. But, you know, as we all know, whiskey is not a quick game. It's not like gin. So it's not making one day and selling the next. And I mean, we all know 16 years is quite a long time to wait. You have to be a very patient person indeed.
So just to be clear, basically the only reason keeping you back from upping the production is staff? Is people working? Or?
So, I mean, that's one of the reasons. But then the main reason is, well, to say like 5, 6 years ago, it was to do with bottling. So they've ticked the bottling box. next issue was warehousing. They've built 2 brand new warehouses. So I think I'm right in saying we have storage for about 16,000 casks now, whereas before it was about 12,000. Which is super. And then so the next sort of bottleneck that we're looking at is the malting process. And then once that's done, then definitely we would see movement and more production at Kilkerran without doubt.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mr. Wright is a very conservative gentleman. I mean, he is in his early 90s now.
I was just going to ask, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he still has the final say. So, for example, at Glengyle a few years ago, one of the guys opened up the main door on a Sunday night to start his shift and was met by a tide of wash coming out one of the washbacks. And unfortunately, one of the staves had rotted through and broken with the pressure. And so that washback was condemned. And the company came down from, I think it was Rothus, and tested the others, and all the other washbacks were condemned as well.
Wow.
So that was a huge job to replace them. I mean, given that, I think a washback is probably what, 20, 25, 30,000 pounds. And at the time, there was a discussion as, should we replace the wooden washbacks with stainless steel washbacks? But the decision was made by Mr. Wright that no, he wanted traditional production, and so he wanted wooden washbacks. And so all these washbacks were replaced with wooden washbacks, which when you look at the sort of value for money and the fact that production hasn't really increased that much. So most of the time, these wooden washbacks are full of water, which, as we know, water and wood are really far too friendly for their own good. So I would say very much, watch this space for having a similar issue in, a number of years. And I mean, the only way we can sort of counter issues like that is by increasing production. So it's something that everyone's definitely very keen to aim for, but it does take time.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's good to hear that you're actually, as a company, working towards upping that production and just getting more of this lovely stuff out to everybody. So.
I mean, Mr. Wright especially has a very soft spot for Kilkerran, because Glengyle, is actually a family connection for him. So it was his great uncle who founded Glengyle. And as well, it was, as a young man, Campbelltown was still a thriving whiskey region. And so he's, when he saw it disappearing in the 80s and 90s, he was very frustrated. And then, he saw Glengyle, as his sort of solution for regaining that status. And I mean, boy, has he done that. I mean, we had 2 working distilleries for a number of years, and then we've got 3 at the moment, and then we've got 3 others in the pipeline.
Wow. Oh, yeah. There's a couple of projects I know about. Yeah. Peter is glad to move to Campbelltown to help you out if you're looking for people to work. So Peter will be coming your way, and Eric is going like this and like, yeah, I'll be there too. And Tom is complaining that these kinds of tastings are not healthy for his wallet. So.
All right. Just send in your CV.
A really good remark, Eric. Tom is more concerned about his wallet than his liver. So that's also pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think final call for any questions if you still want to ask something. Normally I finish off my questions to my speakers with what's in store for the future, but we've already kind of covered that. I think. Maybe in the very near future, what can we expect? Like, are you guys that's maybe a good question. Are you guys coming to Belgium in the near future to do some tastings with us?
Yeah, so definitely Spirits in the Sky is up there in the calendar without doubt. And then I'm sure Fiona will be in contact with Nectar to do some, at least one sales tour a year.
Yeah.
without doubt. So, doing tastings every night and going out and meeting, fans of Springbank and Kilkerran.
Yeah. But since you yourself are more occupied with UK sales nowadays, we won't be seeing you anytime soon in Belgium, Melanie?
No, I'm afraid not. So, but
That's a
it's lovely
shame.
to do tastings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
There we go. Well, there's no more questions going about. Well, Mark's blog is online, so in English, Mark, I guess. I can't see him right now, but I guess it's in English. So the link is in the chat. You can all read it again if you want. Oh, it's in Dutch. Yeah. Well, we can all read it again, Melanie. You can't.
Okay.
Well, you can read it, but
A wonderful Google Translate. Don't worry.
oh yeah. Well, I'm sure we're going to be talking a little bit after the tasting, but I'm going to let you go back to your business at home. Now, is there anything you would like to add as a final note to our people here?
No, thank you very much for your lovely positive comments. I'm thoroughly enjoying the bourbon matured Kilkerran and sherry matured Kilkerran, and I look forward to seeing some of you hopefully in Campbelltown sometime.
Yeah, if you see any Belgians, just tell them they need to bring me a bottle of that triple distilled that you have still left there. Just tell them.
Don't worry.
Really good.
No money
Melanie,
needed.
sorry?
No money needed.
No money needed. No, of course not. Melanie, thanks a lot for the tasting. Guys, I'm going to officially close the official part of the tasting by closing off the recording in a minute. And then, as you all know, we'll be chatting a little bit afterwards also. So, but Melanie, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to us, and hope to see you soon.
Yep, no, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.